I never expected my life could change in a single day, much less because of my golden retriever, Max. You see, Max is not your ordinary pet. He's a bundle of energy wrapped in fur, with a knack for getting himself into trouble. The day started like any other Saturday, with plans to take Max to the local dog park. Little did I know, that day would turn into a hilarious escapade worthy of a viral internet moment. As I gathered his leash and some dog treats, Max was his usual self, tail wagging, nearly knocking over my cup of coffee in his excitement. We drove to the park with Max's head sticking out the window, ears flopping in the wind. Upon arrival, I let him off the leash. In a flash, he darted towards a group of kids playing frisbee, oblivious to everything around him. I chuckled at his antics as he raced around, barking with pure joy, blissfully ignoring my voice calling him back. Then came the moment that would make this day unforgettable. Amidst the laughter and shouts of children, I suddenly spotted a familiar face amongst the crowd, a famous local Instagram influencer, Melanie. She often posted adorable pictures of her cat, Sugar, with captions that garnered thousands of likes. Of course, I couldn't resist the opportunity to take a selfie with her. After all, this could bring notoriety to my own Instagram account, which had long been stuck at a measly few hundred followers. As I approached, I was distracted when I saw Max prancing around with something in his mouth. At first, I thought it was just a stick or some trash, but as I got closer, my heart sank. It was a bright pink, fuzzy unicorn toy, one of Sugar's prized possessions. Apparently, Max had done what Max does best, steal something delightful from someone else's picnic. Before I could shout for him to drop it, he pranced over to Melanie, waving the unicorn toy like a trophy. She looked horrified, her mouth agape as Max dropped it at her feet and proceeded to bark enthusiastically as if saying, "Look what I found." In that moment, I was torn between apologizing and laughing uncontrollably. As if in slow motion, Melanie bent down, and instead of scolding my dog, she made a big show of picking it up. "Oh my gosh, Max, you found my Sugar's favorite toy," she exclaimed, her distinct influencer tone bubbling with excitement. Everyone around us, dog owners, kids, other Instagrammers, turned to see what the commotion was about. Flustered and in a mix of panic and amusement, I started to approach them, ready to intervene. But before I could reach them, in the midst of a playful tussle for the unicorn toy, Max decided it was time to put on a show, not just for Melanie, but for the entire park. With a surprising leap, he snatched the unicorn back, shook it vigorously, and began tugging at it with all his might. The sight of a goofy golden retriever holding onto a fluffy unicorn while a group of kids attempted to coax him into letting it go was nothing short of hilarious. Max was basking in the attention, tugging harder as if it were a high-stakes game between him and the kids. Laughter erupted around us, including from Melanie, who had momentarily forgotten about her cat's loss. To everyone's delight, Max then executed a stunt unlike any seen before. He took off running while still clutching the unicorn, the kids following closely behind, all of them giggling and shrieking. I watched in disbelief as Max ran across the park with several enthusiastic children in hot pursuit, the fuzzy unicorn trailing behind like a flag. It was as if they were in an impromptu chase scene from a movie, and everyone on the sidelines couldn't help but cheer them on. In mere moments, I had gone from a worried dog owner to the proud parent of the canine star of the day. The hilarity of the situation only intensified when Max decided to jump into the park's small pond, unicorn still in tow. Water splashed everywhere, soaking those nearby, including Melanie. Just when I thought he couldn't get any funnier, Max tried to shake off the water, sending drops flying everywhere while still proudly holding the unicorn in his mouth. Kids were laughing, some were attempting to dodge the spray, and Melanie burst into laughter, her phone already recording the entire ridiculous spectacle. I couldn't believe my eyes. Something that started as a potential embarrassment had turned into an unforgettable comedy show. In the aftermath, once Max was dripping wet but still a vibrant ball of excitement, Melanie came over, still giggling. "You've got quite the character here. He might just be better than my cat for content," she said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. Before I knew it, she had posted a video of Max's antics on her Instagram, tagging me. The caption read, "When your favorite toy becomes a big, furry superstar." The post went viral. I was bombarded with notifications as followers poured in, curious about Max who had stolen the show, quite literally. By the time we returned home, I was still processing everything. Max had turned our ordinary Saturday into an unforgettable tale of hilarity, complete with soaking wet clothes, a viral moment, and a newfound friendship with a local influencer. That night, I posted a few pictures on my own account, showcasing the day's events, from Max's coy looks to him proudly lounging with the unicorn. To my surprise, it garnered likes, comments, and new followers at a rate I never anticipated. Soon, our little family, Max, my wife, and I, became internet stars in our own right, all thanks to one unforgettable day fueled by that silly golden retriever's antics. From that day on, whenever someone asked why I loved my pet so much, I couldn't help but smile and recount the tale of the day Max did something unforgettable. My boyfriend's secret double life, found out through a random phone call. I never expected a simple phone call to unravel the life I thought I knew. My name is Anna, and I'm in my late 20s. I've been with my boyfriend, Mike, for almost 2 years. When we first met at a mutual friend's party, I was instantly drawn to his charm and wit. He was everything I ever wanted in a partner, kind, ambitious, and a little mysterious. We spent countless nights laughing and dreaming about our future, building a life together that felt solid and secure. One evening, while Mike was working late, I found myself curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, scrolling through social media. It was a typical night. I thought I'd call it an early night when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. My heart raced, I hesitated but answered. "Hello?" I said, a little unsure. "Is this Anna?" The voice on the other end was distorted, sounding panicked. Yes. "Who is this?" There was a pause, and then the voice rushed, "You need to listen to me." "Is Mike there?" "He's in trouble." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? Who are you?" "I can't explain right now." "Just. He's not who you think he is. He's in danger. You need to find him." Before I could respond, the call dropped. I stared at my phone, bewildered. My mind raced with confusion. I brushed it off as a prank or a wrong number, but the seed of doubt was planted deep in my thoughts. The next few days were filled with strange occurrences. Mike continued to work late, but his stories started to feel inconsistent. One evening, he claimed he was finishing up a project, but his texts came in erratically. I found it odd that he'd leave his phone unlocked, revealing a few odd messages from contacts I didn't recognize. I was starting to feel uneasy. Mike's behavior became more distant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. A few nights later, I was lying in bed next to him, unable to sleep. I decided to investigate. I quietly grabbed his phone from the nightstand and scrolled through his messages. Most were mundane, but one stood out: "We need to meet. It's urgent." The name attached to the message was unfamiliar. Panic surged through me. What was going on? My heart raced as I put his phone back and tried to act normal when he stood next to me. The next day, I took it a step further. I started checking his social media. His profile seemed pristine, almost too perfect. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I needed to know the truth, so I went to a few of Mike's friends, casually asking about him. They all had nice things to say, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something. I finally decided to confront him. "Mike," I said one evening as he walked in from work, "I need to talk to you about something." He looked concerned, setting his bag down. "Sure, what's up? Is there something you're not telling me?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got a strange phone call the other night. Someone said you were in trouble." He frowned, crossing his arms. "That's ridiculous. I'm fine. You shouldn't listen to random callers." "But I found some messages on your phone," I pressed, feeling the anger bubbling up. "And your stories haven't added up." Mike's face shifted from confusion to something darker. "Anna, you need to drop this. It's nothing. I promise." His reaction only fueled my determination. I decided to dig deeper. A week passed, and my paranoia intensified. Then, late one night, I received another call from the same unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. "Anna." The voice was clearer this time, but still distorted. "You need to get out. Mike is not who you think he is. He has a past, a dangerous one. He's been lying to you." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain everything over the phone, but you need to trust me. He's in trouble with people who want him dead. They're looking for him. And they'll come for you too if they find out you're with him. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was shaking as I hung up. My mind raced with fear and confusion. Mike had never mentioned anything about his past. What had I gotten myself into? The next day, I confronted him again. I spoke to that caller. I need you to tell me the truth. Who are you, Mike? He looked shocked, almost frightened. Anna, please. You have to trust me. I left that life behind. I thought I could start fresh with you. But you're in danger, aren't you? I pressed. What kind of danger? He hesitated, his expression flickering between guilt and desperation. It's complicated. I can't go into details, but there are people who want revenge. I've tried to protect you, but now I don't know if I can. Just then, a loud noise interrupted our conversation. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. I felt a surge of panic as Mike's eyes widened. Anna, you have to listen to me. We need to leave. Now. My heart raced. What's happening? He grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the door. I'll explain everything later, but you have to trust me. As we reached the door, the phone rang again, the screen lighting up with the unknown number. I froze, torn between answering and fleeing. Mike was tugging me to go, but I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Anna, answer it. It could be important, he shouted. I glanced at the phone, the urge to know pulling me in both directions. With a shaky breath, I answered, my voice trembling. Hello? Anna. Listen carefully. You need to get away from him. He's not the man you think he is. Panic washed over me as Mike's grip tightened on my arm. I looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance, but all I saw was fear. Who are you? I demanded, my voice breaking. I can't explain right now, but you need to trust me. He's dangerous. Run. Before I could respond, Mike yanked the phone from my hand and ended the call. Anna, we don't have time for this. The sirens were almost upon us, and a sense of urgency flooded the air. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, fear, love, betrayal. Please, just tell me the truth, I cried out, desperate for answers. Just trust me. We can get away, and I'll explain everything. But in that moment, I realized I didn't know who to trust. The sirens echoed around us, growing louder, and I was left standing at the crossroads of love and survival, wondering if I'd ever truly known the man I loved. As I looked into Mike's eyes, I was struck by the uncertainty of it all. Would I run with him into the unknown, or would I stand my ground and face whatever awaited me? I had a choice to make, and it would change everything. In that moment of hesitation, I knew one thing: whatever path I chose, I would never see my life the same way again. It started with the hum of the city, a constant drone that had become the backdrop of my life. I was a city dweller, thriving amidst the chaos, the noise that enveloped me like an old sweater. There was comfort in the blaring horns and the chatter of strangers, and I craved it like an addict craves their fix. But that was before I moved to the cabin at the lake, a decision made in haste after a particularly rough breakup. The isolation was jarring. The first night in that rustic retreat felt like being dropped into a void. There was nothing but the ethereal whisper of the wind slicing through the trees. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, the silence ringing in my ears like a loud alarm. I tried to distract myself with music, but the melodies only amplified the emptiness. Days passed, and each night the silence grew heavier, pressing down on me like an oppressive weight. I began to wonder if I had made a mistake moving there, but I clung to the hope that perhaps one day, I could find beauty in this serenity. Then, one overcast afternoon, I decided to take a walk along the shoreline. The lake was still, its surface reflecting the gray clouds, and I felt that strange pull toward its depths. I picked up a rock and tossed it into the water, watching the ripple spread and dissipate. It was oddly satisfying, and I felt a moment of liberation as if I had set something free. I returned to the cabin rejuvenated, but that sense of peace didn't last long. It was soon overshadowed by a deep-seated anxiety. I began to hear things, soft whispers in the dead of night that wrapped around my thoughts like vine, sending chills through my spine. I convinced myself it was just the wind, treacherous and devious, but every night those whispers grew bolder, echoing through the stillness. I tried to ignore them, rationalizing that they were just figments of my imagination, the product of my isolation. But as week after week passed, I realized I couldn't dismiss it any longer. One evening, as dusk fell, I mustered the courage to explore the woods nearby. I carried a flashlight, its beam slicing through the growing darkness, and ventured deeper than I had ever gone before. The trees seemed to close in around me as the light flickered, each step heavier than the last. The whispers were louder now, like breath brushing against my ear, and I felt the chilling sensation of being watched. The rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, every little sound became magnified, my heart pounding in time with the rhythm of my fear. I stumbled upon a clearing, and there, in the center, stood an ancient oak tree. Its gnarled branches twisted toward the sky, and at its base lay an intricately carved stone, a relic of another time. It felt out of place in the hollow silence, yet somehow it seemed to pulse with life. I crouched down to examine it, drawn by a feeling I couldn't explain. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into words, barely audible but unmistakable. "Leave this place," they warned, "or suffer the consequences." Panic surged through me, and I bolted back toward the cabin, my heart racing. I locked myself in, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I replayed the incident in my mind. That night, the whispers morphed into something more sinister. They were no longer warnings but accusations, taunting me, each syllable pulled taut with malevolence. I buried my head under the covers, hoping that sleep would claim me, but it was elusive, and the darkness stretched on forever. Days turned into a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I felt the pull of the whispers growing stronger, like fingers tugging at my mind, and some part of me began succumbing to their temptation. I fought against it, telling myself it was all in my head, until that unbearable silence had warped into something throbbing, living. Finally, in a moment of reckless resolve, I grabbed my flashlight and returned to the oak tree, heart pounding in my chest. This time, I wasn't merely curious, I felt almost compelled to confront whatever had taken root in the woods. As I reached the clearing, I wasn't alone. There, gathered beneath the branches of the oak, was a group of shadowy figures, their voices swirling together in an unholy cadence. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back, panic bubbling up within me. I wanted to flee, but my feet wouldn't budge. The whispers stopped as they turned to face me, and I realized they were not entirely human, their forms flickered in and out of focus, like a television struggling for a signal. "You shouldn't be here," one figure hissed, its voice a rasping wind. "This is our domain." I blinked, and for a moment, the fear subsided. Something shifted within me, and instead of fleeing, I stood my ground. "What do you want from me?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "Silence," they said in unison, and I felt a chill wrap around my shoulders. "The silence was ours before you came." The weight of their words struck me like a heavy blow. I realized then that it wasn't merely the whispers that haunted me, it was my refusal to embrace the beauty of silence. It was the chaotic noise of my past life demanding my attention, drowning out the tranquility begging to be acknowledged. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and for the first time, I listened, not to the whispers or the panic, but to the profound silence that lay beyond. As I opened my eyes, the figures began to fade, their forms growing translucent like smoke drifting in the wind. "You understand now," they murmured, their voices a gentle breeze against my skin. "Appreciate our silence, it is the melting pot of your soul." I was overwhelmed by a wave of understanding. In that moment, I saw not the fear in the silence, but the beauty in its embrace. I nodded, feeling the weight lift, the burdens of my fears slipping away. The figures vanished, leaving only the oak standing sentinel over the peaceful clearing. As I returned to the cabin, the quiet didn't feel oppressive but liberating. Each night that followed, I moved deeper into that calm, finding solace in the rustling leaves, the distant call of the loon across the lake. The whispers transformed into soft lullabies, and I learned to appreciate each moment of stillness as a gift. The beauty of silence saved me, showing me visions buried under the chaos of my past. Now, even amidst the flow of the city, I carry that lesson with me, always seeking the quiet corners of life, savoring the moments where I can just breathe and embrace the serenity that fills the air. I no longer fear the silence, instead, I cherish it, understanding that it is in those quiet moments we truly find ourselves.
I woke up to find my front door open, but I live alone, and the warm light filtering in from the early morning sun felt almost too bright against the shadows that lingered behind my living room furniture, shadows that seemed to stretch and shift as if they had a life of their own. My heart pounded as I quickly jumped out of bed, a cold chill running down my spine, The door's hinges creaked ominously when I last remembered locking it. How could I have left it open? I tiptoed across the creaking floorboards, my breath hitching with every small sound, straining my ears to listen for the faintest crackle of movement that might indicate I was not alone. The house felt different, heavy with an unspoken tension. I always liked my solitude, but an undercurrent of dread made me wish I had left the lights on. Peering through the doorframe, the porch outside was empty, save for a few curled leaves blown hungrily against the edge, a surreal painting of normalcy that did nothing to ease the sickness curling in my gut. Stepping outside, I called out softly, "Hello?" But only the rustling of the wind replied, and the back of my mind whispered doubts that festered like an infection, reminding me that whoever or whatever had pushed my door open could still be inside. I quickly shut the door and locked it behind me. It felt foolish, but I turned the deadbolt twice, fighting the impulse to flee. I took a cautious step into the living room, another crack beneath my feet, a reminder that in horror stories, the familiar can become terrifying in an instant. I flipped the switch for the lights but was met with a nauseating flicker before they finally hummed to life, illuminating my sanctuary that suddenly felt claustrophobic. My mind raced back to yesterday when I had stayed at home, too consumed by work to leave, and even though I hadn't seen anyone near my house, I shivered at the memories of strange rustling I had chosen to ignore. The distant echoes of my neighbors seemed to become whispers after sunset, unsettling sounds that didn't belong to my world. Why hadn't anyone noticed the door? Where were the neighbors when I needed them? Last summer, I'd had a brief scare with a raccoon knocking over my trash bins, but that was nothing compared to this. My thoughts spiraled back to a few nights ago. Under the veil of darkness, I swore I'd heard tapping near my window, but the fatigue of the following morning pushed those thoughts aside as paranoia. Ignoring the instinct to dive into panic mode, I closed my eyes for a moment, willing the tension to fade, but instead, I felt a freezing surge crawl up my spine when the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway leading to the bathroom, heavy, deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth. Fueled by adrenaline, I instinctively grabbed the decorative knife from my coffee table, its polished blade glinting deceptively in the bright light as I crept toward the source of the noise, praying it wasn't my mind playing tricks. I stood totally still at the end of the hallway, barely breathing, the muffled sound of that slow, methodical tracing canceling any semblance of logic I'd once held. My heart thudded louder and louder, drowning out every rational thought insisting that I should turn around and run. But no, I had to know. For now, curiosity was winning that battle, so I stumbled forward, the door to the bathroom just barely ajar, creaking like an ancient sentinel. I pushed it open, ready to confront whatever awaited me, but the room was empty. The only thing that welcomed me was the mirror's reflection, which was entirely too still. Too quiet. I was the only occupant of this house. That realization hit me hard, slashing through the taut tension like glass, and at that moment, I had to check my phone. Maybe I had unknowingly invited someone over, maybe I'd been drinking and forgot. It wouldn't be the first time I lost track. But as I fumbled to unlock my screen, I froze when my eye caught the corner of a note on my kitchen counter, white against the dark wood. "I've been watching you." A wave of nausea washed over me, and my legs felt like jelly as I stepped away from the note, my breath hitching in my throat. I bit my lip hard enough to taste metal and glanced at my phone. There were no missed calls, no texts, nothing but a singular notification that made my heart race again, a security app ping notifying me that a door had been opened, but it wasn't my front door. I had no idea whose door it was, or how far the implication stretched, and the once mundane morning transformed into a living nightmare. Suddenly, the feeling of eyes watching from the shadows behind me intensified, a palpable awareness crackling in the air. I spun around, knife clutched tightly as I scanned every corner, every nook of the place I called home, but aside from the growing accumulation of panic battering against my sanity, I was utterly alone. Until the familiar sound broke the silence, the heavy footsteps returned, and it was creeping closer. This time, I didn't stay still. Terror took over completely as I dashed out of the kitchen, sprinting for the front door, desperate for freedom, grasping at my last remaining shred of safety, my heart a wild animal trying to escape the cage until it hit me. The door was locked. I did lock the door, didn't I? I could barely think, only flight instinct ruling. I could sense the presence closing in around me, an almost sick satisfaction that was unsettling as it drew near. I had no choice but to run, crashing through the living room and barreling towards the back door as my world became a blurred whirl of confusion, screaming to escape. That's when I heard the laughter, a low, deep chuckle that soaked the warmth of the sunlight, wrapping around me in uncertainty, paralyzing my frantic movements. I stopped at the threshold of the back door, breath catching in my throat as I saw it, standing just outside where the light met the shadow. Its figure was murky but unmistakably human, a silhouette that seemed to flicker in the bright glow of the day. "I was just waiting for the right moment to come in," it said, voice chillingly calm, as if we were friends. I dropped the knife, my limbs went numb as the green grass beneath my feet turned to icy needles, and though I thought I would scream, the sound never escaped my lips. It was impossible to emit a sound. "You should have left the door open, it's far more welcoming that way," it continued with a grin that twisted its face into something grotesque and inviting. With instinct knotted tight, I finally forced myself to move, pushing past the specter of laughter and fear, flinging the door wide open, but as I bolted outside, I realized too late that the laughter faded only when I stepped over the threshold. Whatever was standing in my house was now right behind me, and that meant I was running from something that had found solace in the shadows, flanked by invisible forces, with the warm sun glowing innocently just out of reach.
Title: How I Rediscovered My Passion for Life. For as long as I can remember, I had been drifting through life, rising and setting with the sun, but never truly feeling alive. The colors of my existence faded into dull shades of gray, the vibrant laughter of childhood memories became echoes lost in the halls of time, and a day seemed no more than a monotonous cycle of work, sleep, eat, repeat. My friends often commented on my gloomy disposition, urging me to get out more, to find a hobby, to shake off the cobwebs that clung to my spirit, but every suggestion fell flat. I grew accustomed to my solitude, cocooned within the walls of my small, dimly lit apartment, where I could lose myself in the abyss of Netflix or the hypnotic allure of video games, all the while blanketing myself with excuses for avoiding real-life interactions. It was during one of those apathetic evenings, scrolling through a seemingly endless feed of social media, that I stumbled upon an ad for a local art gallery. The gazes from the portraits seemed to reach out, whispering quiet invitations to explore, to be bold, and, most crucially, to feel. Something about it stirred a long-buried wish in me, but I quickly dismissed it, shoving the thought aside as I sunk deeper into the comfort of my cocoon. A couple of days passed, and as I maintained my routine of isolation, that nagging feeling only grew louder, a little voice in my head daring me to step outside my comfort zone. It was a Saturday when I finally kicked my own ass off the couch, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination coiling in my stomach. I took a shower, the steam filled the tiny bathroom mirroring how I felt, renewed yet uncertain. After wrestling with my reflection for a few moments, I dressed casually, a reminder that I could choose comfort, and hopped on the bus to the gallery. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I breathed in the world around me. When I arrived, the gallery buzzed with life, a stark contrast to my silent existence. People mingled, discussing pieces that ignited their creative spirits. I roamed, feeling like a ghost in a realm of excitement, until a particular painting caught my eye. It depicted a single tree growing triumphantly in a barren, cracked land, its roots sprawled wide and deep. It spoke to me in ways I couldn't understand, its defiance stirred an ember inside, a feeling of resilience I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Suddenly, an overwhelming urge came over me, a desire to create. The weight of this moment hit me hard like a flood. I needed to paint. I needed to pour my soul onto canvas just as the artist had done. But, with that urge came fear. I hadn't held a paintbrush since grade school, where messy finger painting had felt like the most scandalous form of rebellion. The idea of failure paralyzed me, the judgment of others loomed like shadows, but something inside snapped. I fought through my hesitation, purchasing a small canvas and basic art supplies from a nearby store, holding them like fragile promises in my hands, and returned home. Back in my dim apartment, with supplies spread out like a cathartic invitation upon the table, I hesitated. Thoughts swirled, a cacophony of doubts that insisted I inadequately possessed any artistic skill. Yet, as I sat there, I could still see the tree, vibrant and bold, whispering encouragement through the cracks of my self-doubt. It compelled me to begin. I dabbed my brush into the paint tentatively, as if welcoming a long-lost friend back into my life. With each stroke, colors began to emerge, swirling and blending together, creating shapes that hadn't existed before. Time slipped away. Hours evaporated as I lost myself in the rhythm, the motion, the expression. The more I painted, the more I realized how alive I felt. My heart raced, I laughed aloud at the spontaneity, surprised at how the prison of my past self began to crumble with every brushstroke. I didn't care about perfection. All I focused on was the flow, the vividness bursting forth, each stroke urging more out of me, pulling buried emotions to the surface. At that moment, utterly absorbed in the creation before me, I rediscovered my passion for life. I finished the piece late that night. Gaze locked onto the colors swirling, dancing, and surprisingly alive on the canvas, I placed it on the wall opposite my bed. Every day I would awaken and see it, a vibrant reminder that beauty lives within even the darkest of paths. The rebirth of my passion didn't end with that painting. I soon found myself seeking out art shows, joining classes, and engaging with individuals who enlightened my world, breathing life into my lonely existence. Shadows of doubt lingered, but they began to fade like the lingering echoes of a distant memory, replaced by the confidence forged through exploration and creativity. My life transformed radically. I shifted from the dimness of solitude into a tapestry woven with laughter, colors, and connections. Friends began filling my home, sharing stories over cups of tea and spontaneous art sessions, as I ignited the creative spark in others just as I had within myself. It was an extraordinary shift, life transformed into vibrant chaos, a journey through the colorful maze of emotions, experiences, and connections. The rebirth of my passion didn't come without a cost. Existential questions haunted me still during the stillness, reminding me of the darkness I'd emerged from. However, in contrast to my previous life of gray, I found peace in embracing the cycle of emotion, understanding that darkness and light could coexist. Inspiration flowed as I balanced painting with writing, multifaceted media beginning to intertwine in ways I never anticipated. I joined local exhibitions and showcased my work. I felt alive. I was alive. A year later, my art was even featured in a gallery. I stood, nervously biting my lip, surrounded by radiant faces, the laughter echoing around me drowning out my fears. But in that moment, standing beside my creation, I reminded myself of the pivotal Saturday I had wandered into that art gallery a mere year ago. This was the true essence of it all, rediscovering my passion for life not just in art, but in connections with others, in shared experiences, in the reminder that each shadow can lead you to find light anew. I took a deep breath, allowing the laughter and excitement to wash over me. I was finally home in more ways than one. Life was no longer an array of gray, it had transformed into a masterpiece, vibrant, untamed, and unpredictable, just like me.
As I stepped into my favorite childhood park for the first time in years, nostalgia flooded over me like a warm blanket, the familiar smell of grass and the distant sounds of laughter wrapping around my heart. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday, but as I approached the newly installed playground, an unsettling sensation crawled beneath my skin, wiping the smile off my face. Gone were the days of rickety swings and wobbly monkey bars, replaced by glossy, vibrant equipment that glittered in the afternoon sun. The bright colors were jarring amidst the green foliage, and though the children who darted around giggled and shrieked with joy, a chill gripped my spine as I noticed something peculiar about the merry-go-round, its metallic surface gleaming with an unnatural sheen, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw something move beneath it, a flicker of darkness, like shadows cast by unseen eyes, and as I stepped closer, compelled by a mix of curiosity and dread, I could make out strange carvings etched into the wood, shapes that seemed both familiar and horrifying. Twisted, contorted faces grinned out at me, as if smiling in sinister glee. I was about to turn away when a boy, no older than 7, popped out from behind one of the slides, his eyes wide and glistening with a fervor that felt misplaced for such an innocent age. I asked him what he was doing there alone, but he only stared at me with that unsettling grin, pointed towards the merry-go-round, and whispered, "It likes to play," before darting back into the fray of laughing children, and an uneasy knot twisted in my stomach as I recalled a horror story I had heard as a kid about children who vanished in that very park, their shadows somehow absorbed by the very ground on which they played. Suddenly, the laughter echoed differently, like it was muffled by something unseen, and a wave of apprehension washed over me as I made my way to a bench, watching as the playground's vibrance twisted into an oppressive atmosphere cloaked in something darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that the equipment loomed like predators waiting to pounce, too alive and too aware of the innocent lives frolicking around it, and when I finally spotted the kid again, he was standing still, his back to me, watching the occupied swing sway gently despite the absence of movement. Curiosity urged me to approach as he turned his head just enough for me to see his shadowed features carved with lines of unease, and he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper about how the park had changed, about how it now wanted something. But before I could pry deeper, he grinned again and vanished into the playground. With my heart racing, I rose from the bench, determined to leave when a sudden, Blood-curdling scream erupted from the merry-go-round, kids scattered, laughter giving way to sheer terror as I rushed towards the sound, but just as I approached, a wave of darkness bloomed from beneath the playground, a thickness in the air that pressed heavily against my chest. The swing set creaked softly, despite no children being near, and as I drew closer, I saw the merry-go-round spinning on its own, faster and faster, as if something unseen was on board, and for a brief moment, the laughter returned, hauntingly joyful yet filled with an edge of despair. I felt a surge of panic, the urge to flee clawing at my throat, but the curiosity held me captive. Each scream, each peal of laughter, a blend of fear and delight, like sirens singing to lure me deeper into the unsettling allure of the playground. I grabbed the child who had fallen and tried to help him, but his face was racked with terror, his eyes darting around as if he could see something I couldn't. He stuttered about the swings, whispering, begging him to join them, to be part of their game, his hands trembling uncontrollably. I turned to call for parents, to demand someone do something, but they were all entranced, watching the playground as if it was a mesmerizing concert, and I was standing in the eye of a storm, just me and this terrified child. Yet he assured me it was too late for help. The darkness had already burrowed its roots deep into the park, claiming it as its own. Suddenly, the merry-go-round screeched to a halt, and in eerie silence, I saw the faces carved into the wood shift, their mouths curling into wicked smiles, and the laughter turned into cries, echoing within my mind like a cacophony of ghosts. I grasped the kid's hand tight and made a break for the exit, dodging shadows that lurked at the edge of my vision, collapsing with desperation into the light beyond the trees as the park sucked the warmth and joy from my spirit. And the moment I hit the pavement, the laughter ceased, leaving behind a hollow silence. But as I glanced back, the playground stood intact, yet somehow warped, the colors fading, the characters grinning wider, more ghastly, and I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before the next child went missing. Footballs and frisbees forgotten, laughter fading into whispers as shadows swallowed the joy whole. Now, every time I pass by that park, I can't help but notice how the swings sway on their own, or how laughter has turned into an eerie, beckoning sound that echoes in the distance, a sinister invitation I refuse to accept, forever lost in the chilling embrace of my favorite childhood park.
I never considered myself a strong person. In fact, I often felt like I was floating through life, always just on the periphery of everything, never really engaged. But that changed one night when I decided to take a hiking trip in the local woods, a place I'd grown up near but never truly explored. I thought it might be a fun escape from my monotonous routine. The woods were dense, ancient trees twisting together in a way that felt like a living labyrinth, whispering secrets I wasn't privy to. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and I decided to push further onto a path that felt too enchanting to abandon. After an hour of wandering, I stumbled upon an old cabin, its wooden walls weathered and covered in moss, as if it had been swallowed by the forest. Something about it pulled me in, a mix of curiosity and foolish bravery compelling me to explore its dark interior. I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of decaying wood. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. As I stepped deeper into the cabin, I noticed strange carvings on the walls, symbols and hieroglyphs that seemed to shift in the dim light. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a rustle coming from the far corner of the room. Panic surged as I turned, half expecting to see a wild animal or a lost hiker, but what I saw chilled me to the bone. A figure, tall and shadowy, emerged from the darkness. Its features were indistinct, cloaked in shadows. Fear gripped my heart, but instead of running, I felt an inexplicable urge to confront whatever this was. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice echoing in the stillness. The figure raised its hand, pointing to the symbols on the wall. Then, to my shock, it spoke, though its voice was a mere whisper that felt both distant and near. "You seek strength, yet you are lost. To find it, you must face your fears." Just then, the ground shook, and the cabin lurched around me. The shadows deepened. I was suddenly standing at the edge of a vast abyss, the cabin nowhere to be seen. I felt a crushing weight of isolation. My heart raced. I had to decide, would I jump into the unknown, or turn back, spiral again into the safety of ignorance? It was the first challenge. The silence around me was deafening, each moment stretching into infinity. I thought about my life, the self-doubt, the loneliness, the constant feeling of insignificance, and I realized that jumping into the void represented my deepest fears, my failures, the myriad reasons I felt weak. My heart pounded in my chest, but something else burned within me too, an ember of determination. I took a step toward the edge of the abyss, and my breath hitched in my throat. I edged closer, the unknown calling to me in a way I never anticipated. In that moment, I leapt, feeling the rush of air around me as I fell. But instead of plummeting into darkness, I began to rise. As I ascended, the air filled with colors, vivid reds and blues and greens, transforming the abyss into a breathtaking expanse of light. I was no longer afraid. I realized that embracing challenges head-on was my strength. I found myself soaring through this kaleidoscope, feeling freer than ever before. But the journey didn't stop there. I was set upon new trials, each infused with lessons that rang true. In one, I faced a storm, the skies turned dark, and winds howled. I stood my ground, feeling the power of resilience surge within me as I embraced the chaos. In another, I encountered a raging river, swift and treacherous, blocking my way. I had to find the courage to swim against the current, a task that left me breathless and exhausted, but I emerged victorious on the other side, every stroke strengthening my resolve. With each challenge conquered, I felt pieces of myself coming together, fitting into place like a puzzle I never knew existed. I realized that my strength wasn't in physical prowess but in my ability to confront fear, to embrace discomfort, and to push through obstacles. After what felt like a lifetime of trials, a final challenge awaited me, a mirror reflecting my deepest self. In its depths, I saw my insecurities, my failures, but also my potential, my growth, and all the battles I had fought. It was both haunting and liberating. As I gazed into the mirror, I understood that every hardship, every moment of doubt, had forged my identity, crafting a strength I would carry with me. In that instant, the shadowy figure returned, a faint smile on its featureless face. "You've learned well," it whispered. With those words, the mirror shattered, and I felt myself being pulled back into the woods. The cabin had vanished, leaving me standing alone among the trees as dawn broke, casting light through the leaves. My heart raced with the aftershocks of my journey. What had felt like an ordinary hike had transformed into a rite of passage. In conquering the unknown, I had awakened a strength I never knew existed, and the world around me seemed brighter, more vivid than ever before. I walked back, but now each step was a reminder of the empowerment I found in the face of fear. The ancient woods, with all their shadows and secrets, had led me to the most significant realization of my life, that strength isn't a physical attribute but a mental surge, a determination to rise through challenges. I left the woods that day forever changed, transformed by an experience rooted in both terror and triumph. I entered that cabin a lost soul, but I emerged with clarity, a tangible recognition of my potential. It's easy to dismiss fears as weaknesses, to retreat into our shells, but I now know that each challenge brings us closer to who we are meant to be. So, if you ever find yourself in the woods, lurking near shadows and echoes, remember, it is through the trials we face that we discover our true strengths. The journey is yours to take, embrace it, and you may find yourself soaring beyond your wildest dreams. The day I learned the truth about my family. I always thought I knew my family, knew who we were, where we came from, and what we stood for. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I had accepted it. My parents, my brother, my extended family, they were all characters I'd grown up with. We didn't have many secrets. Or so I thought. It all started one night when my mom called me into her room after dinner. She looked different, nervous, even a little pale. It was strange because she had always been the rock of our family, the one person who never wavered, who always knew the right thing to say. She motioned for me to sit down beside her, her fingers drumming nervously against her mug. I asked her what was wrong, and she hesitated before telling me that there was something important I needed to know. "It's about your father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. At that moment, my heart dropped. My father and I had always been close. He was my hero, the one I looked up to, the one who could fix anything. My mind raced as I wondered what could possibly be wrong. She went on to tell me that she had kept something from me for years, something that she felt I was now old enough to understand. She spoke slowly, as though she was weighing every word carefully, as if choosing the right ones might somehow make the story less painful. It wasn't about some minor secret or embarrassing family story, it was something much bigger, something that could tear apart everything I thought I knew. My father, the man I had always admired, was not my biological parent. It was a revelation that hit me like a freight train. The words barely registered in my brain as they left her lips. I couldn't process it, couldn't comprehend how something so huge had been hidden from me my entire life. I asked her what she meant, and she explained that when she and my father met, they were both young and had fallen in love quickly. But there was something in my father's past that he had never shared with her until years into their marriage. He had been married before, and the woman he had married had died under mysterious circumstances, leaving him devastated. What my mom didn't know until much later was that she wasn't the first woman in his life to carry his child. I wasn't the biological child of the man I'd called dad for my entire life. It was a shock that left me speechless. But the story didn't end there. My mom told me that after my father's first wife had passed away, he cut himself off from everyone, even his family. He had changed his name and severed all ties to his past life. The woman who had raised me wasn't my biological mother, either. She had met my father shortly after he had left everything behind, and she had been the one to help him piece his life back together. When she found out about me, she decided to raise me as her own, keeping the secret from me all these years. I felt a rush of emotions all at once: confusion, anger, disbelief. My entire sense of identity had been shattered in a few sentences. It wasn't just about the paternity of my father, it was about everything I thought I knew about myself, about my roots, my family history. And just when I thought I couldn't handle any more, my mom told me that she had tracked down my biological father. She had kept this a secret, too, and it wasn't until recently that she had decided to search for him. It was something she had kept buried, but she felt I deserved to know the truth. I didn't know how to react to that. Part of me wanted to confront my biological father, wanted to know who he was, why he hadn't been there. But another part of me was terrified of what I might find. Was he even alive? Did he know about me? I spent the next few days in a daze. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation over and over in my head, the pain of realizing that everything I had believed about my family was built on a lie. But as the days passed, something inside me began to shift. I realized that the love my parents had given me, the life they had created for me, was real. They had done their best for me, even though the circumstances were far from ideal. I began to understand that this truth didn't change the bond I shared with them, it didn't take away the love and support they had given me all these years. The truth was painful, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. I could see the sacrifice and love my mom had shown in protecting me, in keeping this secret from me all these years. And as much as I wanted to know more about my biological father, I realized that my father, the one who had raised me, the one who had been there through every high and low of my life, was the man I wanted to continue to call my dad. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why my father kept this secret from me or what his reasons were for hiding his past. But I did eventually meet my biological father. I reached out, and after months of hesitation, we agreed to meet in person. The man I met wasn't the hero I had imagined in my mind. He wasn't some tragic figure who had been forced out of my life by fate. Instead, he was just a man, broken, regretful, and uncertain. I don't think I expected him to apologize, but he didn't even try. He didn't try to make up for the years he had missed, didn't try to explain his absence. Instead, he seemed almost indifferent to the whole thing. It wasn't the reunion I had expected, but in a way, it gave me the closure I needed. I realized that I didn't need him in my life to define who I was. I had been raised by people who loved me, who gave me everything they could, and that was enough. I didn't need to search for a missing piece when I already had everything I needed. Since that day, things have been different. I've learned to accept the truth of my past, but I've also learned that the truth doesn't define who I am. What defines me is the love and the relationships I've built, not the secrets of those who came before me. I've come to realize that families are complicated. There are no perfect stories, no flawless histories. But the people who love us, who truly love us, are the ones who shape us. And even though I learned the truth about my family, I'm still the person I've always been. I didn't think I'd ever find closure after Lisa broke up with me. We had been together for 4 years, but that summer night in 2021, she decided we weren't right for each other anymore. I remember sitting on the floor of our apartment, despairing over the vivid memories of our laughter, our shared dreams, and that one time we almost got caught making out in the bathroom at the office party. I felt completely empty, a shell of the person I used to be. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself holding on to the ghost of our relationship. That's when I stumbled upon an old, dusty book at a second-hand shop that I had never noticed before. The title was cryptic but enticing, The Art of Letting Go. The cover was tattered, and the pages were yellowed, almost as if they were on the brink of disintegration. In a moment of impulse, I bought it, convinced it might be a stupid self-help book that could at least distract me for an evening. As I flipped through the pages, something caught my eye. A passage claimed that the book contained rituals that could assist in emotional healing, using the aid of unconventional methods. Intrigued and more than a bit desperate, I decided to give it a shot. The first ritual was simple: write a letter to the person you're trying to let go of and then burn it. I thought it was cliché, but anything felt worth a try at that point. I poured my heart into that letter, detailing every fond memory twisted with the pain of our separation, and then I took it to the park behind my apartment complex. As the flames consumed the paper, I watched my heartbreak rise into the night sky, only to be replaced by a twinge of hope. I guess you could say that set off a chain reaction. The next few weeks, I dutifully followed the book's instructions. There was a bizarre ritual involving salt in a teacup, and another where I had to bury a piece of jewelry that Lisa had left behind. Each time, I felt lighter, like an anchor was slowly being unmoored from my heart. Finally, I reached the final chapter titled The Sacred Ritual of Closure. The directions were peculiar and a bit unsettling. It instructed me to find a specific tree known to the author for its healing properties, which I later discovered was a massive old oak in the middle of the nearby woods. The book didn't mention what must be done there, only that the process would reveal the truth behind my heartbreak. I decided to venture into those woods one dreary Saturday morning, the kind that felt heavy with impending rain. I remember how the air felt thick. After about an hour of wandering through twisted roots and under canopies of ancient trees, I finally stumbled upon it, the oak tree, grand, gnarled, and oddly inviting. I stood there for a long moment, looking up at its sprawling branches, feeling something almost magnetic pulling me closer. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, as if it could sense my grief. Working up the nerve, I approached the tree and placed my hand against its rough bark. The book instructed me to close my eyes and meditate on my feelings, asking the tree to reveal what I needed to see. I chuckled at how ridiculous it all sounded, but I was past the point of caring. As I closed my eyes, an odd sensation enveloped me, drowning out the rustling leaves and distant sounds of nature. I felt a pulse, a rhythm, as if the tree was breathing. Then images flooded my mind, memories of Lisa flashed like a slideshow, but they weren't just the good ones. I recalled moments of tension, arguments, the times I'd failed to listen, and how much I had clung to an idealized version of who she was, rather than accepting the truth of who she really was. Just when I thought I'd come to terms with it all, I felt something shift in the air around me. Pushing through the memories, I heard it, a voice whispering my name, soft yet firm. My eyes shot open, heart racing as I glanced around in confusion. The woods remained still, but I felt an overwhelming presence, as if the tree itself was alive and looking back at me, urging me to look deeper. Unsure, I planted myself on the ground, looking up into the tangled web of branches. Suddenly, I had another vision, a younger Lisa standing beneath the very tree, smiling yet sad, as if she were caught between two worlds. She then looked directly at me, and in that moment, I felt something click. It was then that I understood. I had been trying so hard to hold on to her, but I needed to let go, not just of her but of what I thought love looked like. Standing up, I felt invigorated, almost liberated. The heavy weight of longing had lifted, replaced by clarity. I realized that this tree wasn't a magical entity but rather a mirror reflecting my own emotional state, and it helped me accept my faults and learn to let her go. I left the woods feeling like a new man, buoyed by a newfound sense of freedom. That evening, I found myself smiling inexplicably at nothing, laughter bubbling up as I thought about how silly I had been. It became crystal clear that needing closure was part of clinging to something that wasn't meant to be. So, I went home, and in a burst of inspiration, I shared my journey in a post online, detailing the rituals and my experience. I didn't think much of it, but within hours, it went viral. People resonated with my story and the ridiculousness of seeking healing in such unorthodox ways. Hundreds of comments flooded in, sharing their stories of heartbreak and closure. What started as a personal journey turned into a communal healing ground. I even had people join me on a pilgrimage to that oak tree, where we could share our heartbreaks and heal together. And as for me, while I still carried the memories of Lisa with me, I realized that the weight of heartbreak can transform into something beautiful, a new beginning filled with hope instead of despair. Closure didn't mean forgetting, it meant accepting, learning, and ultimately moving forward. As I watched others find solace beneath that ancient oak, I felt even more grateful. It was a simple book and a strange oak tree that brought me back to life. While heartbreak is a bitter pill to swallow, I learned that it can also lead you to the most unexpected and enriching places. Now, whenever I see someone struggling through their own heartbreak, I laugh softly to myself, knowing that sometimes, closure lies in the most peculiar of experiences. It's the journey we take, after all, that leads us to new beginnings.